Hey, everybody. Welcome to What Fresh Hell Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Amy.
And this is Margaret. And today we're discussing, are we still doing manners, Amy? Is it still a thing?
I mean, living in New York City as I do, I would argue, no. Those went away a long time ago.
Yeah. I mean, manners is such an interesting issue. And I think with kids, and it is something that's changing. And I will preview you that this was a foundational divide between myself and my own mother. And so I'm really interested to have this conversation. But before we do, Amy, we have a mailbag.
Good mailbag today. It's a review. It's a mailbag that's a review. And you can always leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you listen. This is Jason Ari said, I started listening to this podcast and at the time believed that just like any other podcast, it would run its cycle and become less interesting because after all, there's only so much to talk about parenting, right? Oh boy, was I wrong, says Jason Ari. I only have 2 boys, but they're so different. One is on the autism spectrum, and every week I find great tips, advice, and the most important, the it's not just me feeling. The books suggested are usually amazing, makes my reading list busy and interesting. I quote both Amy and Margaret several times a week. My friends are used to it by now. And several now listen also. I love this podcast, and it works for kids of all ages, all stages, all genders, all topics. Thank you, Jason Ari. We really
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much. And let's just be clear, 5 stars, Amy. 5 stars.
Yeah.
Love to see it. And do please go leave us a review wherever you listen, because it certainly helps us out. And keep telling your friends about the podcast. As a podcast, we are becoming a podcast Goldilocks. We've been around a long time
8
for
years.
a podcast.
Yeah.
And so we do kind of need a little boost every once in a while, find some new listeners.
Mm-hmm.
So take a little time out of your day, tell a friend, post about it on socials, review it. We'd love that for us.
I'm excited to talk about manners because, again, living in New York City, but anybody who ever goes anywhere with groups of people sees this, the whole, like, I can play videos on my phone in any location. And I don't have headphones, and I don't need headphones because you can just listen to my, TikTok videos. I feel like that's so
Correct.
widespread. And when you ask somebody to please turn that off, use headphones, lower the volume, I feel like you don't get, in New York City, people probably think you'd be like, you're talking to me, and you get a fight. You get a baffled, like, what do you mean you also have needs and wants that aren't my own? It's just confusion.
Ears.
Yeah. Like they had no idea that this would be something, like, that there's such a thing as rude to wonder about.
Yeah,
I
I
was
was
changing that way.
driving through New York City yesterday, traveling over our beloved George Washington Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I was under the underpass and looking out, and the underpass was just filled with garbage, just like as if it was our default human activity to just be like, I've now finished my Whopper and fries and soda, and I shall now toss all of the remnants of that out the window of my vehicle
Yeah.
in this urban area.
Yeah.
Like, it just struck me. And I mean, it was like thousands of pounds of such garbage. It wasn't like one miscreant had decided to do this. It was just the idea that, I guess I'm done, I'll throw this out the window of my car.
Yeah. I mean, do kids hear about litter bugs still? I feel like that was really driven into my head as a child. That
There
to
was
be a litter bug was
certainly-
like murderer, litter bug. Like same.
Maybe litter bug murderer, let's be honest. Like, we were
Right.
not fans of the litter bug.
Right.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I have this within my own home sometimes with my children. I think in the receiver of the garbage or the receiver of the loud video,
Or the non-receiver of the thank you, right? For the
we
birthday
see
present. Right.
ourselves as the center of that story, that the plate of food left directly to the right of the garbage where you would scrape such food, and then the sink where you would rinse such food, that the message is, I truly care about you and you're feeling so little that I will leave this rotting food here for you to deal with.
That's it. It's beyond indifference. It's actual active disdain. This is what I think of you.
Right.
Right.
But
and
of
we do
course,
that is
the
in the receiver.
lever of those, or the stinky socks on the dining room table, which we had an incident of this week, it's just like, Oh, I'm doing my
I don't
homework.
want
I think
yeah.
I'll take my socks off for reasons unknown. Maybe my feet wanna just hang here. Then I will put these socks in the middle of the dining room table where I'm doing my work, and then I'll be so happy to be done with my homework that I'll just run to my video game system without ever considering that the 5 other people who regularly dine at this table do not want my socks here.
Well, all right, so I'm gonna come in hot, and I'm gonna say that teaching kids about manners or that there are expectations around manners does matter because, again, it's this very point. Like, I just left my socks on the table, or I just didn't want them anymore. It wasn't intended as a message to you, but you received it that way. And having older kids, um, they're entering a world now where if you don't send a thank you after a job interview, there are some people, some job interviewers who will cast you aside in consideration if you didn't send a thank you note afterwards. And I feel like kids need to understand that leaving the socks in the middle of the dining room table will really upset some people or those equivalents. It's like it's can be
I
customs of a
think my
strange land, but they
kids
matter.
understand that leaving the socks will really upset some
Did you make that
people.
clear? Do you
I
think you've made
think
that
I
clear?
made that clear in my response
Good, good.
when
Oh,
my
good.
head
That's
literally exploded. Yes. No, I think that's probably right. Amy, should we take it back way back to the beginning of manners?
sure.
Manners have been around since at least 2300 BC when Ptah Hotep wrote on papyrus.
Mm.
He was a prominent figure of the ancient Kemet society. He is the first recognized philosopher of moral values. He wrote an early piece of Egyptian wisdom literature meant to instruct young men in appropriate behavior or etiquette,
See?
and said that one should refrain from speaking evilly and from staring at people.
This is exactly what we're saying. Like it's moral values that you shouldn't speak evilly. It's like, is it evil to say, well, your face looks dumb? Is it evil? Well, yes, it can be received as evil, but like this is why it matters because the person to whom you're being rude um, ascribes immoral or evil motives to your behavior, which you don't want people to think that about you.
I think that's right. And then I think on the flip side that manners are often used as social gatekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
So typically in uh striated, is that the word? Societies, like societies with very strict hierarchies.
Yes.
Manners can also be used as social codes to keep people out. So, your ability to know when to use your like snail fork
Right.
versus your, salad fork versus your crab tong fork is a societal manner that is coded to send messages to other people that you belong in a room.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that my mother grew up in a two-family house in the Bronx with 28 of her closest relations and ended up doing well in high school, went to Smith College, and I think for her, the what am I trying to say? The manners of society were extremely personally valuable. The idea that like one is quiet at the table. And my mother, if you've ever seen a movie called Mona Lisa Smile, which is now an oldie Lux Celebres, old Julia Roberts movie. My mother went to Smith. They dressed in a full like dress and crinoline
That's
every
what I was
day
gonna
to
say.
go.
And white gloves for class.
White gloves. And I think for my mom, who had come out of, I mean, she talks about like what they did for Halloween is that they dressed all in black and they filled a sock with flour and they ran around the neighborhood like hitting each other with what she described as a truncheon of sock full of flour. And then the idea was like if you
Okay.
came home covered in flour, you lost. Like you had to be sneaky so that the other kids with truncheons didn't hit you with socks full of flour. So she covered the waterfront in terms of, coming from a very chaotic, I think, upbringing and really putting a tremendous value on the quiet structure that this kind of very mannered life afforded, and then watched me be like, "I'm gonna live in a van." And she was like, "Well, where are you gonna iron your clothes if you're living in a van?" I'm like, "No, no, no, you don't seem to understand the concept of living in a van, you know?" And she was extremely, and I think had been taught probably, I don't know, at Smith or other places, taught manners as a very strong personal value, and then I completely rejected those values, and it caused a tremendous amount of conflict, and I think this is something that's going on a lot. So here's a little stat for you, Amy. Are you ready?
Sure.
There is a significant drop from 1990, so this is after my childhood. 76% of US adults said it was an important quality for children to possess manners. Now it's down to 52% who
Because
say
because the kids who weren't taught manners are now the adults. They're saying it
right.
doesn't matter, right? That's like 20, 25 years as a generation, so
I think it's very generational to be like, "Yeah, the way you do things is stupid and small-minded, and we're actually really smart, and we understand that people are all equal no matter whether or not they know that to use the lobster fork." And, like, I get that side of the argument too, but I think that we end up kind of lost in the morass of, like, our manners kind of take your hat off in church, or our manners somehow about coding to other people that we're better than them.
and we have to tease out which those are. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of an example of, like high school graduation behavior.
Mhm.
My kids go to school in New York City where there's all kinds of people from all over the world, all kinds of cultures coming together for a high school graduation. And the old fashioned quote unquote manners is you sit on your hands and you clap politely at the end of the row. You don't yell out your kid's name when they're announced. But I've seen that change in just the between my oldest kid and my youngest kid. Like, who cares if families are so excited their kid is graduating from high school that they want to go "Woo," when their kids that's not rude, that's jubilation, and that you think that it's impolite not to sit in your hands and somebody else doesn't, like that's not hurting anybody. And that's the kind of manners I think we're saying is maybe that's the gatekeeping that's maybe left behind us, better left behind us.
Yeah, for sure. I think manners are a very clear and probably the number one way of maintaining social hierarchies, basically, that like certain people behave one way and certain people behave another way, right? That like a golf tournament is like very quiet and we all do our little golf and we do not raise our voices because we are at golf. Whereas like a soccer game is full of soccer hooligans who like scream and like hit each other over the head with the chairs,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that there are different spaces and places where we behave different ways.
That's and then I think that's about teaching our kids to read those things. Again, I think there's a usefulness there. There's a usefulness to our kids understanding to being able to read, oh, like nobody else is everybody's talking quietly in this environment because I'm in a library. Why don't I do the same? Why don't I read
Let
this
me put my
environment
air horn back in
and
my
join it?
bag.
Yeah, like I guess I'm not saying like who cares if libraries are quiet. I'm saying you're not a bad person if you haven't had it, hammered into you to keep your voice lowered if other people are in the room or whatever, but that our kids do still need to read these and understand these as behaviors you need to sort of exist in the world and have people like you.
I think that's right. And I think that there's a key to that that I'm going to share with you after this break, Amy. I think that as I get older, I mean, I was so dismissive of my mother's entire point of view, worldview, basically, as a teenager. Like everything you stand for, getting dressed up to go on an airplane is so lame and embarrassing. My
Yeah.
mother was
Dressing up to go on an airplane. That's a perfect
extremely
example. Yeah.
ladylike.
Yeah.
She was just extremely ladylike. And I think that for me, I found all of that as a kind of I am the queen of the rebels, college, high school and college, I'm so punk and everything you stand for is ridiculous and I'm so smart that those can be appropriate roles at appropriate ages, and now I'm at a place where, I mean, I find the like country club and we must all, you know, go by these very specific rules of decor. Like, I'm like, oh, you people are all so lame. It's so sad for you. But then I also find that if I go to a pool and someone's playing music off of a speaker, I'm like,
Yeah.
why would you ruin all of our days like
Right.
this? Like,
Right.
or, there's people, we went to a hotel once, we did not realize it was a pet friendly, and there were like 10 dogs in the pool. I'm like, oh, this is disgusting. Like, I have now paid to be somewhere, and it was just a kind of party hotel, like 6 different speakers and 10 dogs in a hotel. I actually don't want that. That
Right.
grosses me out. Like, I find that outside of my sphere of expectation of how people should behave.
But you couldn't in that situation be like, all the dogs out of the pool, all the speakers, because I don't like it like this, because you were in an environment where that was okay.
Right,
And so you could leave if you didn't like it, right? But
right. Like, I actually don't want to be at this party hotel where anything goes. Like, I have really either I've gotten older or whatever it is has changed in me that I actually, as I think the destiny of many of us is, like, I do find that I want, and now my children go to school in like pajamas and an oversized shirt and slippers, and I'm appalled by them. I mean, I think that
You have
one
become
naturally
your
takes
mother.
the journey towards becoming, yeah, that like I actually don't want my children to show up at an event dressed literally like they just rolled out of bed. Like, my
Yeah.
mom used to use that expression, but I mean, my children 2 of my children wear pajamas constantly as their outerwear.
Yeah. It's a moment where even the most formal occasion to get the boys with like the post-pandemic, huge hair on top of their head, to tame that. I just got into that with one of my kids, that we're at an event where you really need to make that hair look uh like Leave It to Beaver, and he was like, "No, no, I don't. This is fine." And so I thought, okay, yeah, it's not hurting anybody's feelings. Yeah, you can wear your hair like that, even though I, and it would have my own mother would have said, "You have to fix that hair." Did it really matter? It was this perfect moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and
That the hair doesn't matter, but the saying hello and goodbye does matter.
well, and I think that you have to, I mean, I think one of the things that is challenging about becoming a parent is taking that role on. That I find that I was always the, like, kicking out at the world rebel kid who is like, Who cares about your stupid, tired ways? We're a new generation and we're here to tear it all down. Hashtag anarchy symbol on my notebook, and that to become the person who is suddenly speaking on behalf of the manners, I find very surprising,
How'd you get
shall
here?
I say.
Do you remember this was like 5, 10 years ago? This was a thing, and Mayim Bialik did it. But I felt like there were like these essays were a dime a dozen. I don't make my kids X.
Yeah, I don't make my kids say please and thank you.
Yeah, so Mayim Bialik wrote this essay that went viral about I don't make my kids say please and thank you, because then they
Mhm.
won't mean it. They have to get old enough to understand what that means, and then they can say please and thank you if they want to, and they'll mean it. And I might let them see me saying please or thank you. And I honestly thought at the time, I thought, oh, tweet. Like it
Right.
when your grandmother gives you a present and went to the store and got it and wrapped it and mailed it to you, you can say thank you. I don't buy into this. But what do you think?
I think that there are the kind of headline versions of this and the not headline versions of this. So I actually refound that article prepping for this episode. And I think that please and thank you, her argument is sort of that you model behavior and that kids learn by modeling better than being told stuff. I think that she's trying to get at the conflict that my mom and I had, which is you have to say please and thank you. If you don't understand the reasoning behind that, we're just constantly in conflict over it. But if I model it, and you see why this exchange is lighting people up and making people feel good, that it will mean more.
Uh-huh.
And the example that she uses, which I actually do sometimes agree with, and we've talked about, I think, is sharing. that this insistence that people are like, share your truck. Like if somebody's playing with a truck and make sure to share whatever you're playing with that you're interested, that there are ages that is actually developmentally not appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you were wearing a scarf and I really liked it, and then like our mom came along and was like, Amy, share it with Margaret. She likes your scarf. Like that sometimes sharing is not the most natural, and it
Yeah.
tends to disrupt play in a way that basically it's kind of an over involvement, and that if you're allowed to like your things and have your things, and that expecting a 3-year-old who's busy in an imaginary world with their train to suddenly like share your train with Amy, it just, I think that there are parts of it that can feel unnatural. But I think that this, to me, it just gets tweet around the margins of like, I don't really care how you get there. I mean, I think that it's kind of like potty training, that if you want to do natural elimination and signing and never have your kids wear diapers and get them potty trained to 18 months, that's fine. I was team keep them in diapers until 2.5 and then spend 3 days figuring it out and being done. Like, to me, it's just different routes to the same basic path. And I think it becomes a thing of, I don't make kids say thank you. And that seems really confusing to people and it gets kind of clickbaity. But I do think that manners are an important thing to teach kids, I think is where I come down. And I think that you can say there are places where this doesn't matter, but that we are part of a society and we are societally coded in certain ways, and that they're going to matter.
And manners change. For example, this idea that I think a lot of kids are taught at pretty young ages in preschool, kindergarten now, that you don't comment on another person's appearance ever, and you don't ask a woman if she's pregnant. Like, I feel like this stuff is really starting to seep into the groundwater. And I have older people in my life who are extremely polite and who know what fork to use, but who think it's fine to say, "Oh, you look like you've lost weight," or "You look like you've put on weight," or like,
Yes.
or her, the baby's skin is darker than I thought it would be, or what? Like, say some crazy
Asking about
stuff.
people's gender. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, that's okay, but don't use the wrong fork. And I feel like we're really shifting in terms of personal dignity is the point for the manners, not that you should say sincerely if it's your boss and best wishes if it's your boss's wife or something.
Well, and I also, this is really different in spaces and places. So my husband's from Texas, and in the South, many young people are expected to say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, when they answer people.
Even if it's
That
like,
is,
would you like more cake, right?
yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. That is how a lot of kids address. And we have been in houses where I would generally have my kids say yes, please, or yes, thank you. But sometimes those things are, they're just enforced differently in different places. And I do think that respecting the norms of the place that you're in is probably good. And
That's the perfect example. So can you just walk me through, how do you talk to your kids about that? Because they spend half their time, at least more than half their time, in a place where that's not an expectation, but several weeks a year, a place where it's very much an expectation. So do they understand that as I'm in a land where this is how one behaves?
Yeah, or I might say, like, I might just say out loud in front of the other person, say, yes, thank you, or no, thank you. That it's clear that that's their default, but that yes is not acceptable in this place. And similarly, if we go to grandpa's favorite restaurant, that is a place where we may not have a hat on or bra strap showing, or you have to have a collar on your shirt at this restaurant. And that is a choice they make in this space. And I think that what I didn't really get as much as a kid was, you show respect for other people's spaces and cultures, I think is important. And I had no concept of that. I was recently out with some young people, and we ordered a side of mac and cheese, let's say, for the table. And one of the people was like, "Oh, this is good," and was eating off of the mac and cheese serving plate, right? Instead of putting it on their plate.
Yes.
And I thought, oh, yeah, that's like a missed social cue. And I couldn't decide because it wasn't really my kid. Like, how much do you correct that? But we don't do that because now you're basically spit is in everybody's food. And then as you pass it, it's a shared dish and we're all going to eat from it. But I think that it works two ways. Being generous with people whose manners are not the same as yours, but basically respecting other people's tradition. Can I give you another example?
Sure.
We were always raised to call adults by their last name. Always.
Mrs.
Every
Abels.
adult in my life was Mrs.
Mm-hmm.
So my kids would call you Mrs. Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
I find that we are lagging. Like most kids in the world call all the adults by their first names now. It's just something
You
that's
think
kind
most
of
people in the world? I think it's very true in New York City and not true anywhere else. That it's still very Mrs.
well, in the
this.
South, you're right, it wouldn't go. But I find that it is something that 60% of the people I introduce my kids to, and now they're teenagers, it's a little bit different. Like, I don't know. I can't even think because my kids have spent a lot of time around you now. Like, they would probably call you Mrs. Wilson, I think still. I mean, it does feel funny, but most of the people I introduce my kids to by their last names say, "Oh, just call me my first name." And it's not a hill I'm willing to die on, but it is a little bit of the thing of actually they should call you what our rules are to call you, not what your rules are to call you.
But that's like a dignity thing, right? Like, isn't that like if I can tell you what my pronouns are and you should honor them, I can see both sides of this. Like,
I guess so.
I'm confusing a 3-year-old if it's like, she's Mrs. Abels, but I'm just Amy. Like, that is confusing in a kid that you're trying to teach. Depends whose house you're at, perhaps.
I guess that's right. I think I come down on the side of you should operate under the rules of the house that you're in.
Right.
So like if I'm in my house introducing my children to you as Mrs. Wilson,
right,
those are the rules of my house.
Yes.
I
like
think you
rule.
should respect them.
Yes.
That's different than saying if I say this is Mrs. Wilson and you say, actually, I go by Ms. Wilson, then I would say, oh, I'm sorry, this is Ms. Wilson. That's your choice of indicator or Mr. Wilson or whatever you want to go by in that structure. I think basically your house, your rules and your manners expectations.
So I'm starting to understand this now, where we go awry with manners or where we would think that, people in the past have gone awry is when we think this is in your house, Mrs. Wilson is the rule. And you start to think that kids who don't do that, who might have not been taught to do that, are rude. Or that kids who don't wear a shirt with a collar on it to any restaurant are rude, right? That your rules should be the rules for the whole world. A collared shirt or not. It's the rule of the place. You can go to that restaurant or not. You got to wear a collared shirt, but you don't extrapolate from that. People with collared shirts on are better than people who don't have collared shirts on.
Exactly. And Amy, when we get back, I'm going to lay some Charles Williams Day on you. And he's going to agree with you.
Okay, here we go.
Amy, I'm going to quote from Charles William Day in Hints on Etiquette and the Uses of Society, written in 1834.
Okay.
In which he calls manners the barrier which society draws around itself as a protection.
See, that's what we don't want to do, right?
Well, I think we do and we don't want to do.
Okay.
I think that we do want to protect ourselves from the tinny speaker at the beach that is playing a song we don't want to listen to.
Right. This is a public space, right, where we all get to be here and enjoy the sound of the waves or whatever.
I think we do want to protect ourselves literally from people using their fork to eat food out of a plate and then passing it to us.
Well, that is protective.
Literally.
Right. It's protective from their strep throat or whatever, potentially.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, there are manners and norms that are around personal protection.
Mhm.
Like, literally, the way that, people do things is to stop them from spreading disease.
Right, right.
Like, I do not want the social norm to be like, "I should be able to sneeze freely. My sneezes feel better when I let them fly loose." Like, I don't care.
Right,
Walk away from the salad bar,
right.
sir.
Sneeze
Like,
into your elbow.
sneeze into your elbow. That is
That's another one.
literally a protective manner.
And
And
that's something that, like, my kids sometimes my husband or I will still sneeze, like, into our fist or hand, and our kids are like, "You sneeze into your elbow." Like, "Don't you know anything?" Because that has been taught to their generation. Good rule, I'm all here for it,
yeah,
but
and
they
it's
they
funny,
think we
like,
have
that
bad
is an
manners.
example of a societal norm that is genuinely to protect our health from
Mhm,
each other.
mhm.
Um, and here we go. I'm gonna read you this sentence
Okay,
from A Manners Manifesto by Tamar Adler, because I think
okay.
it was in the New York Times.
Not from 1834.
No, we're
It's
moving
slightly
into
more
the,
recent.
20th century, not 21st century. Perhaps the way to distinguish useful etiquette from frippery is to discern which rules help us be good rather than seem good. Whatever
Ah,
unites us merits keeping, and what divides us can be folded and stored away with the linen too old and ornamental to use.
okay.
And I think this is a very good touchstone for how we distinguish rules. Is this a rule that helps everybody at the table? So, and I it's not black and white, because I would say, we have a famous quote from my mother, who I had a friend over, uh, male friend, to dinner in college, and we had an amazing evening, great evening, and she was like, "Well, what a lovely young man," after he left, and she said, "Now, where's he from that they wear a backwards baseball cap during the whole meal?" "Oh, that's interesting." So, that's a little bit of a middle ground, I would say. Like,
Yeah.
I would say that wearing a baseball cap at a formal dinner is considered rude by many, many people.
Which that person had no idea about, and that's I guess what I'm saying, as your kids get older, they do need to understand these things, that you go to dinner at your boss's house, you need to take your baseball hat off lest somebody think you're being rude.
Right,
It
but
doesn't
there
matter
is
why, just do it.
no health reason for
No,
that.
no.
I think
And
that,
he definitely
again,
just wasn't doing it on purpose, it just was he liked his hat.
yeah, he was comfortable with his
Right,
hat.
he
He
wasn't like,
just
"I
had his
don't
hat
think
on.
much of
He
this
was never
place."
like,
Right,
"Ah, I
right,
hate you people. I can't wait." It's
right.
just, and I think that I do see this often in the South, and I think to some degree we're experiencing it as a nation, Amy. Like,
Mhm.
different expectations on how things should be done can start to feel like you are a bad person and I am a good person. And those are divides we don't really want to foster. But
Mhm.
I would say one example might be the national anthem at a baseball game, that some people are like, "Oh, they're playing the anthem. Let me finish my popcorn and get to my seat." And for other people, they're like, if you're not standing completely still with your hat off and your hand over your heart at the anthem, you are disrespecting
Me.
people
Right, right.
that I hold very dear, you know? And I think that what is important really to teach kids is to say, first of all, manners that help us to be good to other people and help other people feel good are worthwhile and important. And that those manners change all over the place.
Mhm,
And that you have to, right, as you said, like, reading rooms,
mhm.
figuring out what the expectations are. I went on a girls' getaway with my 2 roommates from college, and we were at a, like, mineral spa in California somewhere, and we were sitting in the pool and chatting at night. We had drinks, and we were, "Yeah, yeah." And after maybe 15 minutes, 2 other people who had been the other end of the pool came over, and they said, "I hope you enjoyed your night because you really ruined ours." And we were shocked. They were completely not on our radar. but they were trying to like meditate in the pool. And I guess during the day, the pool is for meditation, but there was no signs that said be quiet. We just walked in thinking it was a pool. And they were trying to do this meditation activity that we were clearly disrupting by our
You were
incredibly
not
inane,
meditating.
drunken
Right.
conversations. I think that those kind of interactions are kind of inevitable where you just have completely different expectations. I was with another friend coming up on Metro North. Yeah, chatting. And finally someone came over and said, this is the quiet car. And we hadn't realized it was the quiet car. And we were so embarrassed. We were in the quiet car.
But the difference is the second person came over and said, this is the quiet car, right? There's an
Right.
expectation that you're not meeting. And the first people ascribed these, you were trying to ruin my day, motives to you and came over and like, I hope you're happy because you ruined our day, instead of saying, I don't know if you know, but during the day. And it's hard to do those things.
Yes.
And
it's very
but
hard to be on the receiving end of those things too, because
Either
even though it
one.
was the quiet car, my first instinct is like, don't tell me what to do, weird
right.
Karen
People can do that.
stranger. But I think for our kids, it is kind of modeling the concept that we don't want to be anyone else's day ruiners
Yeah.
within.
That's a good rule. Yeah.
But there is still
Within
like
reasonable,
within
right.
reason.
Right.
Like if
In
it
the-
ruins
right.
your day to see a woman not covered from head to toe, I'm going to be your day ruiner. You know, like I think this is why it's a constantly moving target, right? That if it ruins your day that women shouldn't wear shorts, then I'm your day ruiner and I don't care about that. I don't care about your value. But we have to figure out which of those values matter and which don't.
And the expectations. When I was little, we used to go to the town pool, and there's a group of ladies. I can still remember them. I can still see them in my head. And it was a long time ago that I was, 3-4 years old. So these ladies had sort of, teased like wash-in sets, like I get my hair done once a week kind of ladies, Marge Simpson-esque hair. And they would be in the pool. They'd be standing in the pool, not swimming. And kids were not allowed to splash them or get their hair wet, but it was a public pool. Right. And they would stand on the steps because they didn't want to get that wet. So it's like, that's how kids had to. So I remember having to sort of navigate past these ladies who would be very nasty if you splash them, even though it was a public space involving water,
Right.
and so that was unreasonable. But I did try to do it their way. So yeah, don't be in the pool if you don't want to get wet. If you don't want the kid to splash you.
Yeah. But also, if you're a really scary lady from Scranton with a set, you're going to win because you're really scary.
Yeah.
I bet.
I can still see them in my head.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're the stuff of nightmares. And so I do think that this is 1,000 conversations, but that I think that what we're coming to is that manners are worth exploring and explaining to people.
Yes.
And that giving the why to your kids can sometimes make a big difference. I don't know that it would have made a difference with my mom, but I do think that we naturally were so diametrically opposed to it. And I find myself in it now with my own kids that grandma will see showing up in a ripped shirt that shows your bra and pajama bottoms as a sign of disrespect. And therefore, it is what is the most important thing in this situation? Showing respect to grandma. So we're going to dress nicely for this event. And I think that you can also make the call that this person who doesn't think that, I'm going to give an absurd example, like women should wear shorts. We don't agree with that to the degree that we're going to defy that expectation. And we're going to understand that person is mad about it. But that's your choice. And that those choices may be different for different people. And I have to understand that it is a social norm now for children to go to school in pajama bottoms and slippers, even though I find it personally ridiculous and annoying. But that I'm giving in on that norm, but you cannot wear slippers and pajamas to lunch with me. I'm drawing some lines, Amy.
Okay. All right. I think that's fair. Collared shirts only for dinner with Mrs. Abels.
For Mrs. Abels, and you will call me Mrs. Abels. And I think you can also give voice to that. I often say to kids in my house, we don't curse in my house,
Mm.
which, believe me, we do behind closed
Mhm,
doors.
mhm.
But I don't want 12-year-olds walking around my house
Yeah.
cursing up a storm.
Love it.
And it's fine. Like, you can curse wherever else you're allowed to curse, but I will put you out my front door if you do it. And I will put you out from my table if you are watching a screen at my table with no earphones on or at
Mhm,
all. And I
mhm.
think that you can always say, these are the rules that I, who pay for this house and make this house run, are setting. And you should respect other people's rules. And if you really don't respect the rules of their house, you can leave their house, but you can operate however you want in someone
Yeah.
else's home.
Yeah. And then come at it, I wanted to say, from a more gentle, like, grandma would love it if you sent her a thank you note for this birthday present because she put so much thought into it, and she remembered that you said you wanted that thing, and then she got it for you. That's so nice of her, and she put all this effort in. Let's send her a thank you note. That effort is to make other people feel good is worthwhile.
I think you're exactly right. To underline the why, and often the why is, it would mean a lot to this person. It's just kind and nice, like holding doors. I have my son hold the door and my daughter hold the door. I don't care
Mhm.
who's holding the door, but just hold the door open for the next person.
Mhm.
It signals we're doing the bare minimum to take care of each other as a society, you know?
Right.
And I think I can see both sides. I think there's a lot of signaling of, we do this to show we belong to a certain set of people and that you should examine those and figure out if they're really serving you. But basically, a lot of it is signaling we are doing good rather than just seeming better.
Yeah. Yeah. Doing good rather than seeming better. That's it. You solved it.
Solved it. We've solved manners, friends. It is solved.
Hey, everyone, my book, Happy to Help, is coming out in January, and it is now available for pre sale. So, how do you find it? You go to anywhere you buy books and you just type in Happy to Help, or go to our website. And there's a thing in the sidebar where you can pre order the book, or look in the show notes for this episode. We'll link there also. Pre orders really help a book.
It would be such good manners to go
Yes.
and pre-order a
Yes.
copy of Amy's book.
Yes.
It would make our whole society better. So
There
we
would
want you
be.
to do it
Right.
today.
Right. Be a
Happy
helper.
to Help by Amy Wilson. Find it anywhere you buy books. And with that, thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll talk to you next time.
So long.